Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and today's date is November the 17th, 2013. And I wanted to talk about the events of November 22nd, 1963, 50 years ago. It's amazing to think of this. It's amazing that that date is 50 years ago. I remember it very, very well. It is ingrained into my psyche. I know everything that was going on at the time. Most people do who were alive then. And so I wanted to talk about that day a little bit from the perspective of a boy. When I was about 5 years of age, I became aware of politics. I have to say that I became very much aware of President Kennedy. And I started to watch his programs on television. I enjoyed watching his news conferences because they were quite entertaining. Also, in 1962, there was something called the Cuban Missile Crisis. It has been my fortune as years have gone by to talk to a number of people who were involved in that, but from the perspective of where I was in 1962, it was a terrifying event. I can still see in my mind's eye my grandfather shaking and saying, "My God, it's the end of the world." Well, of course it wasn't, but that changed a lot of our opinions and our thoughts about John F. Kennedy. Of course, my mother thought John F. Kennedy was the greatest president ever. She voted for him. I asked her why. She said he was cute. And so my mother would carefully weigh the issues and then vote for the best looking candidate. She didn't like the vote after that, but nonetheless, John F. Kennedy was her man. Well, I became rather fascinated with the whole idea of Washington, the White House, and I actually set up my own little Oval Office in my room. And I used to sit there and sign bills and put out laws and stuff like that. And I used to pretend I was President Kennedy. He became, I guess, my first hero. And so all through 1963, I was very immersed in the actions in Washington and watching my hero, who was on TV quite often and always made everyone laugh. It was entertaining. I didn't realize how entertaining politics was. And then came that day. I remember just the moment that I found out. I don't remember a thing beforehand. I was in class at school, and one teacher walked in front of another and did one of these things into her ear. The other teacher said to my teacher, blah, 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 blah. And my teacher started to cry. Initially, us being kids, we thought it was kind of humorous. We didn't know what had happened, nor did they tell us. And so, all of a sudden, we kept finding there was a problem. School was closing. Our parents were coming to get us. And the school just basically shut down. It was at that point that I found out that the President of the United States, my hero, was no more. You know, as a young kid, it's hard to understand life and death. It was a strange position to be in. My mother came to get me. and she took my grandparents' car to get me, which was a Ford. I always remember it was blue. It was a 1962 Ford with fins on the back. And she picked me up, and on the AM radio, there was just news and somber music. My mother had to stop at the dry cleaners, and she stopped there to pick up clothes. Everybody at the dry cleaners was crying. I was amazed by this. I was watching this spectacle taking place all around me. And so they were crying. My mother was crying. It was small talk. I don't remember what it was. And then we slowly went our way home in between her tears. And we got home and we put the TV on. And basically, for the next 3 days during the day, I was in front of that television. I saw everything happen. Um, Oswald was shot live on TV. And it was an amazing event. I mean, so much was happening, so much in front of us. This was something that had never happened before. Got to remember, news programs are very short. This was the first time that news was going nonstop. And so we watched everything. My mother was beside herself with grief. She ate an entire bowl of Tootsie Rolls. That's how I knew my mother was very upset. And we watched the programs at the Capitol. We watched the funeral procession, watched the burial. And the world changed that day. My world changed that day. Everything kind of changed. It was an interesting moment in which the world that had once been was no more. Now, as a child, I lost complete interest in the presidency with the new president, Lyndon Johnson. I found him dull and boring. And so my little Oval Office was gone. I didn't write any more bills. I kept a very strong interest in history, which I still have to this day, but I stopped. I stopped doing what I had done. I still remember the dream I had. And you have to remember, this is a dream of a 6.5-year-old boy. I dreamt after the assassination that I went to the grave of Abraham Lincoln and I opened his coffin and I put a Band-Aid on his head. He came to life. And I went to President Kennedy and put a Band-Aid on his head and he came to life. And that the two of them, I didn't think of McKinley or Garfield, but the two of them were marching with me through the street in that dream. Always remember that dream that I had within a week 50 years ago. 50 years ago, the world changed. It changed for me, changed for the world. And I thought it would be good to share the memories and remembrances of a boy who had a hero who was lost on November the 22nd, 1963, which in 5 days will be 50 years ago. Thank you.